Humanity's first steps into the interstellar arena were cautious, calculated. The galaxy had been watching, waiting, and when the human ships first appeared on the borders of hegemony space, they were nothing more than an unexpected curiosity, a species just starting to crawl into the stars. The hegemony, a conglomerate of thousands of years of advanced civilizations, had seen it all before. They believed themselves masters of the galaxy, their superiority unchallenged. They extended their hand, offering humanity a place in their empire, assuming that the humans would submit, like all the others. The humans, with their grit and tenacity, played along, at least on the surface. They observed, listened, and to the hegemony's surprise, adapted quickly, far quicker than any species they had encountered. The humans were intelligent, resourceful, and determined, but the question lingered. Were they submitting, or were they learning something the hegemony didn't see coming? The hegemony's philosophy had always been simple: tame the lesser species, integrate them into the fold. To them it was a matter of civilizing. Every new world they encountered was merely a new problem to solve, a new species to bend to their will. They'd done it time and time again. Every species that fell under their control learned to accept their place. The humans, in their early interactions, seemed no different, but as they welcomed their new students into the fold, the hegemony couldn't help but notice something strange. Humanity didn't just learn, they excelled. They mastered alien customs, languages, and technologies at an unnerving speed. Was this just a sign of quick submission, or was it the first hint that humanity had no intention of being tamed? As the hegemony observed their new subjects, their pride began to fade, replaced by something far more unsettling: uncertainty. To the hegemony, the humans were model students, eager, attentive, and incredibly adaptable. They excelled in cultural exchanges, always asking the right questions, always eager to learn. They approached diplomacy with an earnestness that was almost charming. The hegemony officials, convinced that humanity was simply trying to fit in, watched as their newest pupils quickly adapted to galactic norms. Humanity's diplomats negotiated with confidence, navigating complex treaties and alliances. They not only embraced alien cultures, but improved upon them. For a moment, the hegemony felt a surge of pride, certain they had made the right choice in elevating humanity to the stars. But underneath the smiling faces of human diplomats, something darker was stirring. The more they learned, the more they began to change. The hegemony dismissed the signs at first: small things, nothing worth investigating. Thick-walled space stations. The hegemony thought it was simply the paranoia of a young species entering the galactic stage. But those walls weren't just for defense, they were a symbol of humanity's hidden strength. Then there were the reactors. The human ships were powered by reactors far more advanced than anything the hegemony had seen. Dismissed as a quirk of design, the hegemony never questioned their true potential. They didn't realize that those reactors held the power to change the balance of the galaxy. Encrypted communications were another oddity. It wasn't unusual for new species to encrypt their messages, but humanity's encryption was unlike anything the hegemony had encountered before. It wasn't just secrecy, it was strategy, and the more the hegemony ignored these signs, the more they slipped through their fingers. Humanity wasn't submitting, they were preparing. Behind the scenes, 3 key figures guided humanity's rise, each with a role that no one could have predicted. Ambassador Lena Hargrave, humanity's brightest diplomat, was more than just a negotiator. She was a master of diplomacy and deceit, walking the fine line between cooperation and cunning. She had earned the trust of the hegemony, but she had her own agenda, one that was far from compliant. Director Kael Al-Ran, a high-ranking official within the hegemony, watched humanity's rise with a growing sense of dread. His role was to monitor and evaluate, to oversee humanity's integration into the Empire. But he was beginning to suspect that humanity wasn't just another species to be controlled. They were something else entirely, a threat. Yet even he didn't see the full scope of their intentions. And then there was General Isaac Stark, the military strategist, who had spent years preparing humanity for war. On the surface, he was a simple tactician, guiding humanity's military campaigns across the stars. But he knew the truth. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their soldiers, it was their willpower, and that would be the one thing the hegemony would never be able to defeat. In the quiet depths of the galaxy, far from the bustle of the core, the hegemony was preparing for another routine cleansing. It was something they had done countless times before, a species too aggressive, too wild, too uncontrollable. Humanity, in their eyes, was no different from the countless others they had wiped away. Their justification was simple: humanity's territoriality, their obsession with survival and expansion, made them too dangerous for peaceful coexistence. But the hegemony ignored the subtle signs of humanity's brilliance, the creative spark that had ignited civilizations on Earth. They saw only a species to be controlled, to be bent into submission. In their endless pursuit of control, they missed the very thing that made humans unpredictable. Humanity had never been one to bow, especially not when there was a new frontier to conquer. The decision was made: extermination would begin quietly, without fanfare. The hegemony would wipe out a threat before it ever became something more. They had no idea that in doing so they had awoken something that could never again be silenced. As the hegemony's operation began, the universe carried on as if nothing had changed. The cleansing started in the cold silence of space, a quick and unnoticed shift in the balance of power. But what the hegemony did not account for was that Earth was listening. At first it seemed like any other day. Humanity went about its business, unknowingly observing, but Earth knew. Through encrypted channels and hidden networks, humanity was monitoring every signal, every movement in the void. There were no grand speeches or public protests, no cries of injustice, just silence, the calm before a storm no one saw coming. The hegemony assumed indifference. They believed that humans, as they always had, would submit to the inevitable. They assumed wrong. Humanity was already preparing. Beneath the surface of human society, a strange shift occurred. A sudden, coordinated surge of encrypted transmissions rippled through the data streams. Thousands of hidden messages, no one aware of their true intent, except for the ones who sent them. Humanity, in its silence, was organizing, preparing for something only they understood. The hegemony caught wind of it. The encrypted signals, the unexpected bursts of activity. It piqued their curiosity, but they didn't react. They didn't take the signals seriously. To them it was simply a minor anomaly, an eccentricity of a species trying to assert some form of defiance. They assumed it was a pointless, fleeting effort. They had made a critical mistake, underestimating the depth of humanity's resolve. Those whispers weren't the last gasp of a dying species. They were a declaration of intent. Without a single word spoken, without a single public address, humanity's military assets began to shift into position. The hegemony didn't see it at first. The subtle movements were disguised as routine assignments, logistical adjustments no one would question. But the truth was clear to those who were paying attention. Earth was preparing. Quietly, methodically, human forces began to gather. Ships moved into key positions, and weapon systems were activated. There were no rallies, no speeches to the masses, no official declarations. Humanity didn't need them. The hegemony believed that silence equaled submission, but in reality, it was the calm before the storm. Humanity was moving with purpose, and they weren't preparing to submit. It began with a lone human diplomat, a nameless figure stepping out from the shadows. The message was simple, chilling in its brevity. "You have taught us well." The words rang through the cold silence of the hegemony's council chambers, lingering in the air like a poisonous gas. The diplomat's face was unreadable, but their eyes held the weight of something far greater than just a peaceful protest. There was no anger, no violence in the statement, just quiet resolve. It wasn't a threat, it was a warning. The hegemony had made a fatal mistake in thinking humanity would bow. The first sign that humanity was not what they seemed. The first sign that they were never playing the hegemony's game. The diplomat turned and walked away without another word, leaving the council stunned. The universe had just shifted, and the hegemony had no idea what was coming next. The vast expanse of the galaxy, once teeming with activity, and the bustling signals of interstellar commerce, now feels eerily quiet. Across human colonies, there is a disquieting stillness, an absence of transmissions, reports, and regular updates. Strategic disappearances, systems and settlements suddenly cut off from all external surveillance. The hegemony's intelligence dismisses it as mere technical failures, an issue of faulty communication relays or routine maintenance. But beneath that calm veneer, a whisper of uncertainty begins to trickle through the ranks of hegemony officials. Something feels off. The reports don't add up, and the quiet stretches on, longer than expected. Could it be that humanity, despite its supposed docility, has learned how to evade control? As these thoughts begin to swirl in the minds of the hegemony's leaders, their first real doubts creep in. Is it just a glitch, or is it something far worse? Massive civilian convoys begin moving, silent fleets drifting through space with no clear destination, no official reports on where they are headed, or why they are leaving their settlements. The ships are vast, their coordinates shifting in ways that should not be possible under normal circumstances. Hegemony officials scramble to find answers. Why would entire populations, civilians, non-military, be on the move without a reason? These massive ships don't follow any logical pattern. They change course without explanation, suddenly halting, only to jump again into the unknown. Hegemony intelligence is baffled. There is no official declaration, no formal warning from Earth. It is as if these fleets were coordinated by an invisible hand. The hegemony cannot understand it, cannot predict it, and in their confusion, they begin to second-guess their assumptions about the docile nature of humanity. Something shifts. The atmosphere on human-controlled stations grows tense. Security is heightened, but not for any stated reason. Outposts across human territory are fortifying their positions, adding layers of protection to the perimeter. Automated defenses power up, and personnel are placed on high alert. There is no formal declaration of hostilities, no provocation from the hegemony to justify this. Still, human stations seem to be bracing for an attack, a threat that only they seem to sense. The hegemony watches from a distance, dismissing these measures as precautionary, just another quirk of humanity's overblown sense of self-preservation. But the truth is, these precautions are strategic, not paranoid. The hegemony is looking at the wrong signs. The fortifications are not meant to defend against attack. They are preparing for something far greater. Humanity is organizing, and the hegemony still does not understand what they are facing. As these signs continue, dissent begins to brew within the hegemony's leadership. A few cautious voices start speaking up, urging that humanity might not be as docile as they once believed. There are murmurs, warnings of possible resistance or rebellion, but those voices are quickly silenced. The empire is far too vast, far too powerful to be threatened by a fledgling species like humanity. The hegemony leaders dismiss their concerns, claiming that humanity is simply too disorganized, too fragmented to mount any real opposition. The arrogance of the hegemony's leaders blinds them. They dismiss the warnings, choosing to believe that humanity's drive to survive will always be their undoing. It is a fatal miscalculation. The cracks in their confidence are growing, but they will not see them until it's far too late. A small hegemony fleet, tasked with surveying human territory, ventures into the unknown. They are sent to gather intelligence, to probe human defenses, and discover what they've been hiding. But something goes terribly wrong. The fleet never reports back. No distress signals, no final transmissions, just silence.
Complete and utter silence. The hegemony waits for a response that never comes. When they attempt to make contact, the signals vanish into the void. The truth is undeniable now. Something is wrong. Humanity is not behaving like the docile species they assumed. And now, the first wave of hegemony scouts has disappeared, swallowed whole by the silence they never thought possible. One by one, the human diplomats, the carefully crafted faces of peaceful negotiation, resign without explanation. The halls of the hegemony are suddenly empty. The absence of human representatives sends ripples of confusion through the empire's political structure. The diplomats' departure is unprecedented. No formal notice, no speeches, just a slow, deliberate walk away from the empire they once worked so hard to align with. It takes the hegemony far too long to realize the truth. This is not retreat. This is preparation. Humanity is no longer playing by their rules. The diplomacy was never meant to appease the hegemony. It was always a means to an end that is now in motion. Then it happens. An encrypted message, repeated on every channel they can find. The phrase that sends chills down the spine of every hegemony official. Pest control. At first, the hegemony believes it's referring to the species they've already exterminated, a simple term to describe a previous task. But as they delve deeper into the signal, a chilling realization begins to spread. The term isn't referring to past victims, it's referring to them. The hegemony itself is the pest, the target of humanity's new strategy. Humanity is no longer merely reacting to threats. They are taking the fight to the heart of the hegemony's empire. The hegemony finally grasps the truth. Every shift, every move, every deliberate delay, it was all part of a larger strategy. Humanity had never been under their control. Every action, every diplomatic move, every quiet moment of silence was a part of the plan. War is not coming. It has already begun. Humanity has outplayed the hegemony at every turn. And now, as the hegemony finally realizes the magnitude of the situation, the endgame is set in motion. The galaxy will never be the same. Humanity's rise has only just begun. Too late to stop it. The hegemony's realization. The hegemony sat on its throne of stars, a seemingly impenetrable empire stretching across the galaxy. For centuries, it had crushed weaker species under its heel, forcing them into submission, bending them to its will. Humanity had been no different, until now. Intelligence reports flickered across the hegemony's command center, each one more alarming than the last. At first, they dismissed the odd movements of human fleets, their sudden silence, as nothing more than a passing phase, a mere glitch. But as the reports grew more detailed, the truth became undeniable.
What makes us human? Philosophical. We're not the fastest, we're not the strongest, but we endure, and when it matters most, humanity changes everything.
Humanity wasn't afraid of the hegemony. They never had been. It's a trap, whispered a strategist, his voice trembling as he stared at the data, the fleets, the fortifications, the complete withdrawal of human diplomacy. It was all part of a plan, one that had been years in the making. The realization hit like a slap to the face. Humanity had never sought peace. It had been preparing for war, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Panic rippled through the hegemony's ranks. The empire's confidence cracked. Time was not on their side. The reports kept coming in, each one worse than the last. The final message was clear. The clock had run out. The hegemony had underestimated humanity. Now they were facing the consequences. In the far reaches of the galaxy, the hegemony had always believed that human colonies were nothing more than outposts, fragile, vulnerable, easily swept aside. The civilian structures, the so-called shelters on every planet, were thought to be inconsequential, comfort zones, to keep the population subdued and controllable. But as the hegemony's war machine moved to strike, they realized the brutal truth. Every civilian infrastructure, every settlement, every station was a fortress in disguise. Beneath the surface of what they assumed were peaceful colonies lay powerful military complexes, armed to the teeth with weapons that rivaled the hegemony's most advanced tech. "We've been blind," one commander muttered under his breath, his face pale. Their ships had already been obliterated by what seemed like nothing more than a sudden explosion. The hegemony's illusions of control evaporated in an instant. The colonies had never been defenseless. They had been preparing quietly, meticulously, in the shadows. Every civilian vessel, every cargo ship, battle-ready, all along. The hegemony had assumed humanity could be controlled. They were wrong. Humanity had been ready for this moment, and now it was too late to stop them. The hegemony, desperate to crush any sign of resistance, decided to act first. Their target, a single human colony on the outer rim, one of the quieter, less significant worlds. It seemed like an easy target, an unassuming place to showcase their power, to prove to the galaxy that the hegemony was still in control. They launched their attack with all the force of their imperial might, ships descending like a swarm of locusts, weapons primed, ready to reduce the colony to ash. The order was simple: annihilate the colony and send a clear message to Earth. Resistance is futile. But as their ships broke through the atmosphere, their optimism turned to dread. The colony wasn't burning. The air didn't fill with the screams of civilians. Instead, the hegemony's fleets began to disappear, one by one, as they were torn apart by human weaponry. A massacre, yes, but not of humans. The hegemony's fleets were being torn apart by weapons they didn't even know existed. The colonies were not helpless. The first strike had been theirs to make, and they had miscalculated. The hegemony had expected humanity to cower, to fold under the weight of their superior firepower. Instead, they were met with an unrelenting counterattack that struck with surgical precision. Humanity's fleets emerged from the shadows of their colonies, swift, efficient, and merciless. The hegemony's ships, once the pride of the empire, were reduced to floating wreckage. Ambushes were coordinated across multiple fronts, every strike more devastating than the last. A fleet here, a station there, each one vanishing without warning. The hegemony had thought they could control the galaxy, but the war they had started was no longer under their control. Humanity had taken the initiative. They had fought back, and now the hegemony was scrambling to respond, unable to keep up with the sudden onslaught. The hegemony's once imposing fleets were vanishing, and their arrogance had cost them everything. It was over before the hegemony could even comprehend it. A decapitating strike hit the heart of the hegemony's leadership. A single well-placed attack left their ruling council in disarray. Commanders, once confident and commanding, were now frantic. The leadership had collapsed, and with it, any semblance of order. Chaos spread like wildfire across the empire. No one knew who was in charge anymore. The lines of command had shattered, and every soldier, every fleet captain, was left to make their own decisions. There was no structure, no central authority. The hegemony was leaderless, exposed, and vulnerable. One night, just one, had shattered the foundation of the mighty empire. The hegemony had fallen. The galaxy was no longer theirs to command. Amidst the chaos, a lone figure stood before the remnants of the hegemony's leadership. He was a diplomat, a strategist, his expression unwavering. He had waited for this moment, knowing that it would come, and now, in front of the crumbling empire, his words would resonate. "You thought you were civilizing us," he began, his voice cutting through the confusion like a blade. "You thought you were controlling us. You were arming us." The remaining leaders of the hegemony stared at him, stunned. They had misunderstood humanity. They had thought their power would intimidate, that their control would be absolute. But now, it was too late. The diplomat's words rang out, a judgment delivered with the weight of 1,000 years of oppression. War was never your decision to make.
The message was clear. Humanity hadn't just been surviving, it had been waiting for the moment when the hegemony would overreach, waiting for the moment when they would be ready to take control of their own fate. The galaxy was about to see what happened when humanity took control. The once unshakable hegemony now lay in ruins. Its vast fleets, the pride of 1,000 worlds, drifted aimlessly through the stars. Once these ships were symbols of unstoppable power, but now they were helpless, disbanded, leaderless, broken. Command had crumbled in a matter of hours, and what was left of the empire was a disorderly shell. The hegemony's leaders were dead, their strongholds shattered. There was no one left to lead, no one left to coordinate the forces. The once feared empire was now fragmented, its military scattered across distant systems. The last whispers of command flickered out. Fear began to take root, the kind of fear that even the most powerful empires had never known. For the first time in history, the hegemony felt vulnerable. They had always believed their strength was unassailable. Now, they knew better. Humanity's fury had cut through them like a hot knife through butter, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Humanity's hold on the galaxy was tightening like a vice. The space lanes that had once been under hegemony control were now marked with the human flag, a symbol of something new. There was no room for retreat, no safe zone to fall back to. The hegemony's warships, cut off and surrounded, had nowhere to go. Each system they tried to flee to was already under human control. Every attempt to signal for reinforcements met with an empty silence. The galaxy had already turned, and the hegemony was trapped, its vast fleet surrounded by a web of human ingenuity and willpower. The warships, now powerless, surrendered one by one, with no hope of escape. Humanity's strategic genius had become undeniable. Every move was planned with brutal efficiency. The hegemony, once so proud and unchallenged, now found themselves at the mercy of the very species they had once oppressed. Humanity had proven that no matter the odds, they could adapt, and they could win. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the hegemony, the empire that had never once bowed, finally did so. Their fleets, once feared across countless systems, lowered their weapons. The great empire that had crushed all opposition for eons was now on its knees, offering unconditional surrender. There were no negotiations, no mercy, no attempts at saving face. The terms were simple: surrender or face annihilation. There was no debate. The hegemony's might, their pride, had been shattered, and their very existence was at humanity's mercy. The war was over. The empire had fallen, its once unimaginable strength now nothing more than dust. Humanity had won, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The fall of the hegemony rippled across the galaxy like a shockwave. Formerly oppressed species, those who had lived under the iron rule of the hegemony for centuries, saw a glimmer of hope. Humanity had done the unthinkable. They had freed the galaxy. For the first time, the oppressed species had the courage to rise. They rallied behind the humans, emboldened by their victory. The slaves were now the masters of their own destiny. A new order was born, one where the former subjects of the hegemony could stand tall. The power had shifted, and those who had once been bound by chains were now the ones setting the terms. Humanity had not only liberated the galaxy, it had become the beacon for all those who sought freedom. An empire fell, but in its place, something new was rising. A new galactic order, shaped by humanity's strength and will. In the midst of the victory, the diplomat who had orchestrated it all stepped forward. He was no longer just a negotiator. He had become a symbol of humanity's strength, a warrior king, unafraid and resolute. He stood before the galaxy, his voice carrying through the silence, his words firm and final. "We do not seek war," he began, his tone measured yet resolute, "but we do not fear it." His gaze swept across the room, making eye contact with every representative of the galaxy's species. The message was clear: Humanity was not merely a survivor. They had not just endured oppression, they had overcome it. And now, they were a force to be reckoned with. The stars would never forget this moment. The galaxy would now understand that humanity was no longer to be ignored, to be taken lightly. It would be respected, and if anyone dared to challenge them again, they would face the same fury that had shattered the hegemony. Humanity was a force that could no longer be stopped, and the galaxy would tremble. In the quiet aftermath of their defeat, the remnants of the hegemony leadership sat in stunned silence. The once mighty empire, whose fleets had blotted out stars, now lay in ruin. The massive warships that had once ruled the galaxy were reduced to floating husks, abandoned and crippled. The leaders, those who had managed to survive the downfall, grappled with the truth they had avoided for so long. They had misjudged humanity. Arrogance had blinded them to the truth. For centuries, they had considered themselves the pinnacle of civilization, the supreme force in the galaxy. But in the end, humanity had shown them that strength alone was never enough. The brilliance and adaptability of humankind had turned the tide against them, proving that no empire, no matter how vast, could ever remain invincible. They had underestimated humanity's creativity, its unyielding will to survive. Now, all they could do was watch as the empire they had spent centuries building crumble. Their story would no longer be one of triumph, but of caution, a warning to any who thought they could face humanity and win. From the ashes of the old, a new symbol of humanity's might rose, the Colossus, the largest space station ever constructed. It hung in the void, a testament to human ingenuity and determination. Its towering spires reached into the stars, dwarfing anything the hegemony had ever built. A fortress that could not be ignored, a monument to victory. This was no mere station. Its defensive systems were beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Weaponry that could wipe entire fleets from existence with a single shot. Shields strong enough to withstand the most relentless of assaults. The Colossus was a declaration. Humanity was no longer a fledgling species, struggling to survive. Humanity was here to stay, and it would be a force to reckon with. The hegemony's fall had been swift, but humanity's rise was unstoppable. The Colossus orbited a distant star, its presence an undeniable statement that the galaxy now had to acknowledge. Humanity was its new power. In the shadow of the Colossus, a single figure watched from the darkness. Alone in a dimly lit control room, he listened to the distant hum of the station's engines and the whispers of the past. His eyes were hollow, haunted by the events he had witnessed. The fall of the hegemony, the destruction of everything he had once believed in. As the final echoes of humanity's triumph reverberated through the galaxy, the lone observer spoke softly, his words barely a breath. "We never stood a chance." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of realization. Fear began to set in. The hegemony was no more. The galaxy was now a new, unknown landscape, and one question lingered in the void: who was next? The fear was palpable, spreading like wildfire. There were no more certainties, no more guarantees. Humanity had changed everything, and its wrath had no boundaries. In the depths of space, where the stars burned cold and distant, humanity's fleet stirred once more. They had been dormant, waiting for the right moment. Now that moment had come. The Colossus stood ready, its defenses poised for action, its weapons prepared for battle. A new target had emerged, a new conquest, born from the ashes of the last war. The screen fades to black. The war was far from over. Humanity had only just begun to unveil its true power, and the galaxy could only wonder what would be left when humanity's machine moved again.
They said Earth was small, but when we spoke, the galaxy listened. And now you're here, not late, but right on time. This channel's been waiting for people like you, so don't hold back. Subscribe. This journey belongs to you now. They came, but they never understood us. In our silence, there was thunder. In our eyes, war. This story isn't theirs, it's yours. This channel is yours. If you feel it, hit subscribe. Don't walk this path alone.